Welcome to the Dark Mysteries podcast, where we tell dark and mysterious stories. If you like the dark and mysterious, hit that like and subscribe button to help support the channel. Today we're diving into something really baffling, and we're pulling directly from National Park Service documents and related records.
Yeah, we're heading to a place many of you probably know, or at least know of, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Beautiful place.
Absolutely stunning. But the story we're unpacking from these sources today, it's anything but beautiful. It's about a disappearance that's, well, it's haunted the park and certainly a family for decades now.
That's right. Our sources today, they really center around the vanishing of a little boy, 7-year-old Dennis Martin. This happened way back, Father's Day weekend, June 1969.
And like you said, this wasn't just a case of a kid wandering off for a bit. According to these records, it sparked a search effort that was, well, almost unimaginable for its time, just huge.
Huge, yeah. And yet, the documents are clear. It yielded absolutely no physical trace of the boy. None.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really work through these documents, try to understand what happened that day Dennis went missing, look at the massive, truly unprecedented search that followed, the challenges they faced.
Definitely challenges.
And the big unanswered questions that still hang over this case.
Okay, so let's set the scene based on the records. It was Saturday, June 14th, 1969, the day before Father's Day.
Right.
And the Martin family, they were out hiking, camping, near Spence Field, which, if you know the park, it's one of those big grassy balds right up on the Appalachian Trail. Pretty popular spot.
And the family members there, according to the sources, Dennis, of course, his father, William C. Martin, his grandfather, Clyde, and his brothers, Doug and Michael.
And Dennis himself, just 7 years old, from Knoxville, Tennessee. The records even mention his clothes, a red T-shirt and these sort of off-green short pants.
Okay, so they're near Spence Field. What happened? The sources describe a pretty specific moment, don't they?
They do. It's around 4:3 in the afternoon. Dennis and his older brother, Michael, they apparently had cooked up this little plan, kids playing, to surprise their dad and grandfather, who were sitting somewhere near the Anthony Creek trailhead area. Part of this game involved Dennis sort of sneaking off the trail. He had to jump out, scare them playfully.
A simple game, something countless kids do in parks.
Exactly. But what happened next was just terrifyingly fast. His father, Mr. Martin, he stated later, and it's in the records, that it wasn't more than 5 minutes. 5 minutes between seeing him last and realizing, wait, where's Dennis? And they immediately started calling his name, searching right there.
5 minutes. Wow. That's almost no time at all for an outing to turn into, well, a nightmare.
It really is.
And from those first few frantic minutes, the situation just exploded, right? These documents detail a search that quickly became like one of the biggest in Park Service history, certainly up to that point.
Oh, absolutely. It ballooned. From just the family and maybe a few park staff initially to this full-blown multi-agency operation. The scale described in 69, it's kind of hard to grasp.
Who is involved? The list is pretty incredible.
It really is. You had the National Park Service employees, obviously. But then the National Guard got called in up to 97 troops from the Air National Guard. They brought in Green Berets.
Special Forces, wow.
Yep. 22 more initially, bringing the total Special Forces personnel to 82. Then you had the Coast Guard involved, the U.S. Air Force, 38 different civilian rescue squads from all over, the FBI, the American Red Cross.
And just regular volunteers, too, right? Students.
Hundreds of volunteers, yeah.
Yeah.
Students mentioned from places like Lake City Junior College, Maryville College, just a massive turnout of people wanting to help.
The sheer manpower. These documents even try to quantify it. They mention, 13,420 total man-hours?
And 1,677.5 man-days. I mean, just think about coordinating that many people over that much time.
And the cost. It wasn't cheap either, was it?
Not at all. The direct costs listed are over $50,000, $50,584 to be exact in the report. But that doesn't even include all the absorbed costs from, the military, other agencies pitching in. The total estimate was over $65,000.
That's a huge amount of money for 1969 and the area they covered.
Also vast. The general search area eventually reached something like 56.75 square miles, with a more intensive search focused on about 12.5 square miles around where he was last seen.
It's difficult to even picture covering that much ground, especially in the Smokies. That terrain is rugged.
Oh, it's incredibly tough. Steep slopes, dense woods, rhododendron thickets you can barely push through.
So given that massive effort, the tough terrain, what kinds of problems did they run into? Because the documents make it clear it wasn't exactly a smooth operation,
Yeah.
especially at first.
No, not at all. The records are pretty candid about the difficulties. A big one right off the bat. Heavy rain. It poured that first night.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that really hampered the search dogs. Made tracking scent almost impossible early on, which is often so critical.
What about equipment? Did they have everything they needed?
They brought in specialized gear, but ran into issues. There was this U-10 search aircraft fitted with a loudspeaker system. The idea was for Mr. Martin, Dennis's father, to fly over the area and call out to him.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the plane had a landing mishap in Cades Cove. Damaged its landing gear, the stabilizer.
Yeah.
It became unusable. So that plan went out the window.
That's rough. Were helicopters useful?
Helicopters were vital, yeah. Especially for getting search crews into remote spots quickly. But even they had limitations. Some of the military choppers, for instance, weren't authorized to carry civilian searchers, which, complicated things logistically.
And just managing all those people. You mentioned how fast it grew.
Exactly. The reports state the search developed so rapidly that the organization kind of struggled to keep pace with the sheer buildup of manpower.
The review documents seem pretty blunt about that, mentioning issues with, like, manpower management, overhead coordination, even public relations.
Yeah, and a specific problem was a shortage of trained crew leaders. You had all these volunteers showing up, eager to help, but not enough experienced people to effectively lead small search teams in that terrain.
Communication must have been a nightmare, too.
Totally overloaded. The park dispatch office just got swamped. Calls from the media, volunteers trying to check in, agencies coordinating. The post-search review actually recommended things like getting extra phone lines installed, maybe even PA systems for managing info flow in future big searches.
And safety. With that many people, often inexperienced in rough terrain.
Always a concern. The review noted that accidents were thankfully few, which is amazing given the scale. But they did point out some risky things, like seeing searchers riding on the back of trucks with unbraced stake racks, stuff like that.
Right.
It led to a recommendation for having a dedicated safety officer, just focused on preventing accidents in future large operations.
So you've got this huge force dealing with tough terrain, bad weather, equipment issues, logistical headaches, a real struggle.
A massive undertaking facing massive challenges.
Okay, so despite all those hurdles, they mounted this incredible effort. What did they actually find? How did they search? And what was the result?
Well, the methods were pretty standard for the time, but done intensively. Grid searching specific areas, systematically checking trails, all the drainages, those little creek beds and valleys, ridge tops, even the lake shore eventually.
And the family had ideas about where he might have gone.
They did. The documents mentioned the family believed he might have headed downhill, possibly into the Anthony Creek or Eagle Creek drainages. So a lot of focus, especially from the Green Berets and the specialized rescue squads, went into those specific areas.
Makes sense. Okay, so they covered huge ground, used trained personnel, focused on likely areas. What did they turn up?
And this is the core of the mystery right here in the official reports. The phrase used is stark. Not a trace, a scrap of cloth, a shoestring. Nothing has ever been found.
Nothing. Seriously. After all that, not one shred of his red shirt. Not a footprint confirmed to be his.
Nothing confirmed. It's staggering, really. Despite thousands of people combing 56 square miles, no physical evidence of Dennis Martin was ever located within that vast search zone.
That's just almost unbelievable. Did they find anything out there?
Oh, they found things, sure, but nothing that could be definitively tied to Dennis. The records mention finding small animal bodies like a dead bobcat. There's also a note about finding an old, rotted red garment that was almost completely decomposed.
A red garment? Could that have been?
It sounds tantalizing, but the description, old, rotted, almost completely decomposed, suggests it probably wasn't related to Dennis's bright red T-shirt from just days or weeks earlier. It was logged, but not considered a definitive find.
And I saw a note that Mr. Martin, his father, later asked about items that were brought in during the search, like pieces of shoes, handkerchiefs, maybe another red shirt or sweater.
Yeah, that really underscores the family's desperation, doesn't it? He was inquiring, hoping maybe something had been found, something overlooked. But the official conclusion remained. None of those items were confirmed as belonging to Dennis.
And then there were those later reports that came in months after the main search ended.
Right. Those add another layer of, well, confusion or maybe hope, depending on how you look at it. In November 1969, so about 5 months later, this woman, a Mrs. Dorothy Montgomery, reported seeing a boy who looked like Dennis
Where?
in Knoxville in a white car being driven by a bald man. She apparently saw Dennis's picture again later and felt quite positive it was him.
And did authorities follow up on that?
They did. The report went through a state police detective to park officials. The source notes Mrs. Montgomery was traced, presumably to verify who she was and the details.
Any other reports like that?
There was another one mentioned from September '69. A child's blue canvas sneaker was found down by the Little Pigeon River near the Chimney Tops Trail Bridge area.
So what happened with those leads? Did the park officials think they were credible?
Well, the documents confirm they received these reports. They looked into them. Mrs. Montgomery was apparently checked out. But ultimately, both the sighting in Knoxville and the sneaker found near Chimney Tops were dismissed by park officials as being unconnected to Dennis Martin's disappearance.
They don't say exactly why they dismissed them?
The sources don't go into exhaustive detail on the reasoning, unfortunately, just that they were received, considered, and ultimately deemed unrelated, which, leaves you wondering.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you have absolutely zero physical evidence from the main search area, you can totally understand why people, especially the family, might start looking for, well, other explanations, even unusual ones.
Absolutely. And the sources specifically state the family was most receptive to predictions and various suggestions or suspicions, which, given the utter lack of answers, makes perfect sense.
What kind of predictions are we talking about? The documents actually list some.
They do. Some quite specific ones from psychics of the time. Jean Dixon, who was pretty famous back then, based in Washington, D.C., she apparently gave very detailed directions.
Like what?
Things like Nixon. Look near where he was last seen. He went down an incline, turned left at about a 45-50-degree angle, went into shrubbery or thicket, and would be found underneath the point of that incline in a spot with no trees right where he veered off.
Wow. That's very specific. Hard to follow on the ground maybe, but specific.
Right. And there were others. A Harold Sherwin from Los Angeles predicted Dennis would be found about 2.5 miles to the left of where he was last seen. Said he'd fallen off a steep place and got hung up in bushes.
Anyone local?
Yeah. A Jeffrey Owens from Gatlinburg reported having dreams. In one, he saw Dennis nearby, hidden behind a log. In another, he dreamed Dennis had dragged himself to a river to get water.
And it wasn't just predictions coming in remotely, right? Some people actually showed up.
Correct. The documents mention a Mr. Billy Noland, described as a psychic interpreter from New Orleans. He actually came to the park, spoke with the Martin family, and then headed out himself towards Rocky Top, up on the Appalachian Trail, based on whatever feelings or insights he had.
So, a lot of unusual input. And the family themselves, they had their own suspicions develop over time, didn't they? Concerns about potential foul play.
Yes, the sources mention the family developing specific suspicions about certain individuals or possibilities. They apparently mention names like Richard French, who was a contractor, someone referred to as the lady in Miami, and even had questions about the psychic, Billy Noland.
And there was that other really disturbing theory mentioned in the sources.
Yeah, the wrong boy theory. It's chilling. The documents note that there was actually another Martin family camping at Spence Field that same weekend, the Carter Martin family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And this raised the horrifying possibility in the family's mind, and noted by investigators that perhaps someone had intended to abduct a child from that Martin family and mistakenly took Dennis instead.
That's just awful to even contemplate. What did the FBI make of these possibilities, especially the kidnapping angles? They were involved, right?
They were involved, assisting the Park Service. But the sources are pretty clear. The FBI concluded there was no evidence to launch a large kidnapping investigation.
So despite the family's suspicions in these strange circumstances, the FBI didn't see grounds for a full kidnapping probe.
Correct. The search chiefs and the FBI reportedly agreed on that point. Based on everything they gathered during the search and initial investigation, there just wasn't concrete evidence to really substantiate the kidnapping rumors, however plausible they might seem in the absence of other clues.
That must have been incredibly hard for the family to hear, to accept, when there was literally no other explanation.
You imagine it would be. The documents even note, somewhat delicately, that the family possibly does not want to accept the possibility that the boy will never be accounted for.
Understandable.
And Mrs. Martin, Dennis's mother, she apparently voiced this kind of dual belief that if Dennis was still somewhere on that mountain after all this time, he was likely deceased. But she also held on to the possibility that maybe someone had picked him up near a road, taken him out of the park somehow, which would explain why no trace was ever found in the park.
A way to make sense of the senseless, maybe. So the massive search wound down eventually. But the effort didn't just stop cold, did it?
No, not immediately. After that main huge push with all the agencies scaled back, the Park Service kept 3 of their own employees on it full time. These were guys who knew the park incredibly well.
And they kept searching for
another 90 days. 3 solid months of continued, dedicated searching by park staff after the major operation ended.
3 more months, and still nothing.
Still nothing, which finally led to the official closure of the search. The documents give the date, September 13th, 1969. Exactly 3 months after Dennis Martin vanished.
And this case, it even reached, like, really high levels of government, didn't it?
It did. The family was clearly reaching out everywhere they could. The records mention involvement from their congressman, Congressman Quillen, and even the White House. President Nixon's office actually responded directly to Mrs. Martin.
What did they say?
Mostly expressing sympathy, acknowledging the tragedy, and assuring her that a massive effort had been made by the federal agencies involved, particularly the Park Service.
And then there was that post-search review we mentioned earlier, that comprehensive look back.
Right. The documents emphasized its purpose wasn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame for not finding Dennis. It was really about learning lessons.
What kinds of lessons?
Mostly operational ones for future searches. It highlighted again that initial rush to get organized, how the structure maybe didn't quite keep pace with how fast the manpower built up. It talked about needing better ways to handle public relations, communications, maybe even briefing politicians like congressmen more directly during major incidents.
So really trying to improve the process for next time based on this incredibly difficult experience.
Exactly. Analyzing everything from training needs, equipment, supervision tactics, search methods, even how to handle the flood of information, including those psychic leads and public tips.
Okay, so let's try to wrap our heads around this deep dive into the sources. The disappearance of Dennis Martin back in June 1969. It's just an utterly unsolved tragedy.
It really is. And the documents powerfully underscore the sheer scale of the effort to find him. Massive resources, huge costs for the time, thousands of people, multiple expert agencies.
Covering enormous areas of really challenging terrain, both dense woods and open fields.
Yet, despite everything thrown at it, the result, recorded officially, was 0. Absolutely no physical trace of that 7-year-old boy was ever found. Not a thread, not a shoelace, nothing.
And the family, as the documents show, they just never stopped hoping, never stopped searching in their own way, printing reward posters, Mr. Martin returning to the area year after year.
The lack of closure is just profound.
It leaves us, and maybe you listening, with this really chilling, persistent question. Think about it. Such a thorough, massive, intensely documented search in a place like the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And it yields absolutely nothing. What possible combination of factors, environmental, human, maybe something else entirely, could possibly lead to someone vanishing so completely without leaving a single solitary clue behind?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What could possibly explain it?
We'd love to hear your theories on this one. What do you think might have happened to Dennis Martin? Let us know in the comments below. We discuss new stories weekly, so don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.
Yeah, and leave a comment telling us about other stories you think we should discuss in the future here on The Dark